Well, good morning, good afternoon, and welcome everybody to a special programme presented by Buckingham Education and the Independent Schools Cultural Alliance on the coronation of King Charles III. So today we are officially 1 week away from Coronation Day, and we're delighted that you are here with us to learn a little bit more about this very sacred and very historic ceremony. The ceremony we're going to tell you about dates back almost 1,000 years. So we're going to talk about that today. So my name is Luke Little. I'm the Managing Director of ISCA, the Independent Schools Cultural Alliance, and the founder of Buckingham Education, which is ISCA's online learning platform. And joining me this morning from the United States, we are very privileged to have among us Michael McLaughlin.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Michael, and I've been a part of the ISCA staff for the past several years. And I'm head of middle school at Austin Preparatory School in Reading, Massachusetts, which is one of the ISCA schools that will be at the Cranley campus this summer.
Absolutely. And Michael, after doing this presentation, will actually be flying to the UK and will be live in London later this week for the coronation festivities.
True, but I will not be one of those 2,000 invited guests in the Abbey.
Not through lack of trying, though. Well, we're very pleased to welcome all of you as our guests on this journey through the pomp and pageantry of the coronation of the monarch, King Charles III. So here you can see in the slide, you can see the official invitation for the coronation. And what a historic coronation it will be, as this country hasn't had one since 1953. So for most of the UK's population, this will be the first coronation in their lifetime. I should say that even though Michael and my name are on that invitation, that's not a real invitation. Ours has probably got lost in the post, I would imagine, but I'm still waiting. I've kept Saturday free next week, so my fingers are crossed. But this is the invitation, the exact invitation that has been sent to those who are lucky enough to have been invited.
And as you look at the invitation, central to the design is the motif of the green man seen here at the bottom of the invitation. This is an ancient figure from British folklore that's symbolic of spring and rebirth to celebrate the start of the new reign. The crown of the green man is with natural foliage, representing the emblematic flowers of the United Kingdom, oak, ivy, and hawthorn. And as you see on the invitation, a border sort of represents a British wildflower meadow with all sorts of flowers, emblematic again of the United Kingdom, cornflowers, dog roses, bluebells, wild strawberries, and even a sprig of rosemary for remembrance. You also see wildlife throughout the meadow. And of course, this is very important to the king, who's a big conservationist and environmentalist. So you'll notice bees and butterflies, a ladybird, a wren, and robin. And it's just so rich with symbolism. Many of the flowers are in groups of three, representing that King Charles is the third king to have this name, sitting on the throne of the United Kingdom. Also hidden in the wildflower meadow are a lion, a unicorn, and a boar, which are taken from the crests of the king and of the queen consort, and her Majesty's father, Major Bruce Shand, amongst the flowers. So rich in symbolism.
Absolutely. It's an amazing invitation. So the plan in this presentation is to explore, firstly, the succession of King Charles and share some of the locations that you'll see when you watch the coronation. We'll have a look at some of the faces in the crowd that you can look out for if you're watching on television. We'll explain the order of service and some of the symbolism that is part of the service. And hopefully this will help you appreciate and understand the importance of the coronation celebration next weekend. But also, we'll be linking everything we talk about today with the sites that our students, that some of you on this call today, will be exploring in July. Because for our 2023 students, they will be exploring the UK just 2 months after the most historic event of the last 70 years.
So the first documented coronation at Westminster Abbey was that of William the Conqueror on Christmas Day in 1066. And there has been an unbroken line of monarchs for the last millennia, with sovereigns such as Henry VIII, Queen Victoria, and Queen Elizabeth II, the legacy of whom we will experience in various ways with our students at ISCA this summer. So as we think about Charles, who came before him? So Charles is part of a dynasty that's known as the House of Windsor. And in the days of World War I, Charles's great-grandfather, George V, who is the grandson of Queen Victoria, restyled the name of the family as the House of Windsor after the castle outside of London. When he passed in 1936 became known as the Year of the Three Kings. After George V died, his eldest son became King Edward VIII, but he abdicated or gave up the throne in order to marry the twice divorced American socialite Wallis Simpson. And this decision by Edward VIII is directly connected to the fate of our current sovereign, King Charles III. When Edward stepped down from the throne, when he abdicated in 1936, his brother, the Duke of York, became King George VI. And King George VI was, of course, followed by his eldest daughter, who then became Queen Elizabeth II. That's Charles's mother, who is celebrated as England's longest reigning monarch with a reign of 70 years, 214 days. So as we think about why is it that Charles is the king, let's look at the most immediate family tree in the House of Windsor. So Charles is the oldest of the 4 children of the previous sovereign, the late Queen Elizabeth II, and her husband, Prince Philip. So Charles, of course, is the oldest, and his youngest siblings are Anne, the Princess Royal, Prince Andrew, and Prince Edward. So Charles married his first wife, the late Princess Diana, in a fairy tale wedding at St. Paul's Cathedral in 1981. And that, of course, is one of the sites that we'll visit on ISCA this summer. So we'll get to see that majestic cathedral. Charles and Diana had 2 children, Prince William, who's now the Prince of Wales, and Prince Harry, who is living here in the United States out in California. So Prince William, he married Catherine Middleton, and together they have 3 children, Prince George, who we'll talk about a little bit in today's presentation, and the younger siblings, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis. Charles has married a second time after Diana died in a car crash in Paris in 1997. Charles eventually married the longtime love of his life, Camilla, who will be queen consort, in 2005. So here we have an image taken from last summer's Platinum Jubilee celebration. And it's a pretty striking image because we have the queen, of course, and the next in line in the succession. We have, of course, the queen here, next to her, the then Prince of Wales, and now King Charles III, with the queen consort, now Camilla. And on the far side, we have Prince William, who is now the Prince of Wales, next in line to the throne. Next to him is Prince George. Prince George is second in line to the throne now, followed by his sister, Princess Charlotte, and the young Prince Louis. And then, of course, here is Catherine Middleton, their mother, here on Buckingham Palace balcony in celebration. And of course, that will be part of the celebration of the coronation next Saturday.
So that's a very poignant photo because that's the last time the Queen was pictured on the balcony after her long reign. So when did Charles become king? Charles became the king immediately on the death of his mother. So the famous saying is Her Majesty, or His Majesty in the past, is dead, long live the king. So he became the king immediately upon the death of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, on the 8th of September, 2022. And the Queen died at Balmoral Castle, which is her royal residence in Scotland. And you can see Balmoral Castle here. And it's here that we begin, because it's here at Balmoral Castle, upon the death of the Queen, that the timeline leading up to Charles's coronation began. So Balmoral is located in the stunningly beautiful Scottish Highlands and was first made a royal residence by Queen Victoria and Prince Albert in 1852. Balmoral was a very special place for Queen Elizabeth II. The late Queen spent every summer holiday here between July and October, here at Balmoral in Scotland. And this was really the place where the royal family could be normal, or as normal as it's possible to be when you are Queen of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. In fact, the former Prime Minister, British Prime Minister Tony Blair, would go up and spend a week with the Queen, like every Prime Minister does, during the summer. And he described how the Queen, after dinner, would put on the rubber gloves and go and do the washing up when he visited. So that's how relaxed the royal family could be at Balmoral. So because of this love of Balmoral, it's perhaps fitting that the Queen spent her final days here. So as soon as Queen Elizabeth II died, Charles acceded the throne. And it was from Balmoral that Charles released his first statement as monarch following the death of his mother. You can visit Balmoral in Scotland, and I highly recommend it. It's an astonishingly beautiful castle in an even more beautiful setting. And some of you may have noticed that one of our programs this year, because we have 3 programs running concurrently in July, one of them is called the Balmoral Programme. And this reflects the late Queen's love of Scotland and the central role and the importance of Balmoral in the events of the past 9 months.
So after the Queen passed, the King then journeyed to London, where the Accession Council met at St. James's Palace in London to make the formal proclamation of Charles as king. And though Charles could have selected a regnal name, a name different from Charles, like many of our popes have selected, or even previous monarchs of the United Kingdom or other countries, he elected to keep his original birth name of Charles. And in doing so, he became King Charles III, because he is the 3rd monarch with that name to rule over the United Kingdom. A word about the previous 2 Charleses. King Charles I was the absolute monarch who was eventually executed for treason in 1642 outside of the banqueting house in Whitehall. And that will be one of the sites that we will walk past while on ISCA this summer. And then there's, of course, King Charles II, who's referred to in history as the Merry Monarch. He restored the crown after the Civil War. He actually was the one who commissioned the coronation regalia that we'll see used in the ceremony next Saturday, and was the king during the Great Fire of London, which are all stories that we will explore with students this summer as we walk around London and the rest of the country. After the Accession Council, King Charles was proclaimed as king with ceremonies held throughout the realm. But today, we really want to focus on some of the special sites of London that are going to be part of the coronation ceremony next Saturday.
Absolutely. I mean, Royal London is like a stage set, like a film set. It's the background to the pomp and pageantry of every momentous occasion for our nation. So it's the setting to events like state funerals, celebrations, jubilees, coronations. And a lot of what we see, we owe to architects like John Nash and, of course, Christopher Wren, both of whom we will explore during ISCA. So let's look at some of the sites now that will be a backdrop to the coronation. So when you turn on the television next Saturday, these are the sites that you will see. And remember that many of these sites are ones that we will be exploring with the ISCA students in July. So here we have a map of the royal route that the king is expected to follow on the way to the abbey and in the more elaborate coronation procession on his return from the abbey. So there's two processions, one on the way to being crowned and one on the way back from the abbey to Buckingham Palace. So if you turn on and you think, why are they going that direction? I thought they'd be going the other. That's the reason. So let's start with, perhaps, I'm sure if I asked you to name the most famous royal palace, you would probably say Buckingham Palace. So the King's Day will start at Buckingham Palace. As I say, it's perhaps the best known palace of the British monarchy. 775 rooms, and it's essentially the London home and office of the sovereign. I think the best way to think about it is it's a bit like the headquarters of the British monarchy. So you can have tours of Buckingham Palace. Sadly, they don't let school groups inside the palace, but you will be able to have a great picture outside of the palace. It's got 19 staterooms, 52 royal and guest bedrooms, 78 bathrooms. And obviously, it's got a huge collection of art as well. So over 20,000 pieces of art. If you've ever seen The Crown, you will have got a glimpse of what the inside of Buckingham Palace is like. Of course, they did not film in Buckingham Palace, but they based the sets on Buckingham Palace. So that's where the day will begin. So when Charles leaves Buckingham Palace, he will ride in the Diamond Jubilee State Coach, which is adorned with wood from a number of historic palaces, such as Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle, as well as wood from St. Paul's Cathedral and Lord Nelson's ship, the HMS Victory. All of these are sites that we will explore during ISCA. So the procession will leave Buckingham Palace and proceed down the red painted Mall, and red painted a bit like a red carpet. So they'll proceed down the Mall away from the palace towards Admiralty Arch, and there'll be thousands and thousands of well-wishers in the crowd. There'll be Union flags hanging, as you can see, along the route, and they will end up at the top of the Mall through Admiralty Arch and into Trafalgar Square. Again, Trafalgar Square, a very famous part of London. You can see Nelson's column there in the middle of Trafalgar Square, the 4 lions guarding his column. And the procession will get to Trafalgar. It will then turn right and walk down Whitehall, passing the home of the British Prime Minister. That's Rishi Sunak at number 10 Downing Street. And it will also pass the cenotaph, which is the focus of our nation's remembrance. The cenotaph was built in remembrance of those who died in service of the country during the First World War. So this procession really does tick off all the top sites in London. So I really urge you, when you're watching, to think, I will be there. I will be walking this very route in July, or my children will.
So the procession will then make its way here to Westminster Abbey. And since 1066, it has been the location of the coronation of 39 British monarchs. King Charles will enter here via the Great West Door to a fanfare of trumpets, and then the coronation will begin. Inside the Abbey, he will be greeted by 2,000 guests, many of whom will be sitting here in the nave of the church, and who, because of the screen that you see there in the middle of the picture, because of that screen, that will separate the main part of the church from the choir, which is where much of the coronation ceremony will take place. As the king enters Westminster Abbey, he will pass the marker of the tomb of the unknown soldier, and we expect that he will walk down the aisle to Hubert Parry's 1902 setting of Psalm 122, I Was Glad. As the king enters the choir, the King's Scholars of Westminster School, the choir singing in the choir, will acclaim Vivat Rex. And this is a tradition and a rite of these choristers that goes back to 1685, where when the monarch walks in for the coronation, they exclaim Vivat Rex. Charles will then process to the area in front of the high altar, which is known as the Coronation Theater. And as you see here in an image of a previous coronation, balcony seating will be installed around the altar to accommodate the various peers and dignitaries who will be taking part in the ceremony. And just earlier this week, the palace released the names of many of these different peers and nobles who will have different roles in the coronation. You'll also notice several chairs in the Coronation Theater. There will be 2 thrones for the king and for the queen consort. And then closer to the altar and placed on the Cosmati pavement is
the center of the whole ceremony, the coronation chair. And I really think this is amazing. This chair was made by the order of King Edward I in 1296. And this medieval chair, 800 years old nearly, is just used for the coronation ceremony. So every single monarch since then has been crowned on this chair. King Edward commissioned this chair to enclose the very famous stone of Scone. So here you can see the stone of Scone, or the stone of destiny, which King Edward I brought from Scotland. And for students who participate in our ISCA Scotland programme, they will have the opportunity to see this stone set alongside the Scottish crown jewels in Edinburgh Castle. And if you ever visit Edinburgh, I highly recommend a visit to see the Scottish crown jewels and then also the stone of Scone. So the king will return. I mean, we're going to skip a bit here and talk about how he will leave the abbey, and then we'll go back to talk in a bit more detail about the ceremony. But after the ceremony, the king will return to Buckingham Palace in the gold state coach. And this is probably the highlight of the coronation procession. And you can see why. It really is quite spectacular. The coach is drawn by 8 Windsor grey horses, and it's accompanied by a small army of liveried footmen and grooms, as well as a detachment of yeomen of the guard. So this coach has been used at the coronation of every British monarch since William IV in 1831. And the processions are a wonderful way to see the top sights of central London, as I mentioned earlier, and we will walk the processional route during ISCA in July. So as you continue to watch the coronation coverage, the focus turns again to Buckingham Palace. So you'll see the king greet his subjects, greet well-wishers from the Buckingham Palace balcony, the very famous royal balcony appearance. The royal balcony overlooks the Mall. The crowds will line up throughout the length of the Mall, and the Royal Air Force will perform a celebratory flypast. So that is what's going to happen on Saturday. The following day, on Sunday, our focus turns to the west and the coronation concert from the grounds of the iconic Windsor Castle. This castle was founded in 1070 by William the Conqueror, and every monarch since then, including our new king, is a direct descendant of William I. So we always say to the ISCA students, remember the date 1066. That's the date of the Norman invasion. It's when William the Conqueror conquered England and became King William I. And all of our royals since then have been descendants of him. And this palace, we will, of course, have the opportunity to explore during ISCA in July. And now we're going to focus back to the Abbey and talk a little bit more about the players and the service.
Yes, so let's explore some of the people who you'll see as you watch the coronation coverage next Saturday. So here are some of the principal players to be on the lookout for. First, of course, is King Charles III. It's his coronation day, of course. So Charles III has been the longest serving heir apparent to the throne. and is the oldest person to accede to the British throne. Next to him, of course, is the Queen Consort, Camilla. And though she will officially be styled as Queen, she is a Queen Consort. What this means is that she is not a ruler in her own right, like Queen Elizabeth II was. The title is a courtesy title given to her as her status as the wife of the king, King Charles III. The principal celebrant for the day is this gentleman here, Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury. And we'll, of course, be visiting Canterbury Cathedral and the beautiful miracle windows associated with St. Thomas Becket while we're on ISCA this summer. And the Archbishop has a very important role on May the 6th. Most notably, you'll notice he's the one who will put St. Edward's crown on King Charles's head at the climactic moment of the crowning. You'll also notice this gentleman as well, the Dean of Westminster Abbey, David Hoyle. You can expect to see him throughout the coverage because Westminster Abbey is known as a royal peculiar. This means that the church answers directly to the crown. So the Dean of the Abbey is sort of the official host of the coronation service and will be in a special way assisting the monarch throughout the service. You'll also notice this gentleman here, who's the Earl Marshal. So he's the most senior peer in the realm with the title of the Duke of Norfolk. And his family has had this honor being the Earl Marshal since 1672. So since 1672, and his role is responsible for the ceremonial state occasions, most notably coronations, and will of course be visiting his ancestral seat, his castle, Arundel Castle, while we are on ISCA. You'll also notice Prince William, the Prince of Wales. He's next in line to the throne. And we expect that during the homage, which is part of the coronation ceremony, that Prince William will be offering homage on behalf of all of the peers of the realm to the king. When Queen Elizabeth had her coronation in 1953, this was a very long part of the coronation ceremony, but in more modern times, there's been an effort made to shorten the length of the service, but in no way take away from the majesty of the monarchy and the magic of the moment. And so we expect that William will sort of serve in this ceremonial role. Of course, his wife, the Princess Catherine, will be someone to look out for in the crowd. And their oldest son, Prince George, is also someone to look out for. Prince George is the second in line to the throne, is the oldest of William and Catherine's 3 children. And he and several other boys are going to have the role of pages to His Majesty, King Charles III. So you look for him to be holding robes or things of that nature during the ceremony. And this is pretty historic because he is the youngest future king to play an official role at the coronation. So pretty exciting things to look for. So now let's look at parts of the ceremony and some of the symbols that you're going to see next Saturday. So the coronation ceremony is really broken into 5 distinct parts. So the first part of the coronation ceremony is known as the recognition. Now, during this part of the ceremony, it's essentially making sure that we have the right person in the abbey before we go ahead and anoint him and put a crown on his head. So we really want to make sure we have the right guy. So King Charles will be presented to the people. They'll check, yes, he is the man who we want to crown, and he will be proclaimed as the undoubted king. And all who are in attendance in the abbey will be asked to support him and basically check one more time before we go through with the ceremony that we have the right person. Next, the second part of the ceremony is the oath. And so now that the king's identity has been checked, it's time for him to make some promises. So the king will be asked a series of questions about his promise to govern, to be just and fair, to use mercy, to maintain the law of God. So he'll be asked a series of questions, and then he will promise to uphold this oath by making a written promise to his subjects before the high altar. The third part of the ceremony is truly the most important and sacred moment of the entire morning, and that's called the anointing. So during this part of the ceremony, the Archbishop of Canterbury will anoint the king with holy oil. And we can expect that we will hear the coronation anthem of Zadok the priest, which was written by Handel for George II's coronation in the 1700s. So the oil that's used here for the anointing was created using olives harvested from 2 olive groves on the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem, and then was pressed just outside of Bethlehem. And then the oil itself was blessed, was consecrated at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. And so this demonstrates that from ancient kings of the Bible to the present day, monarchs have been anointed with oil from this very sacred place. And the archbishop will mark the sovereign with oil on his head, on his hands, and on his heart. And just last night, the palace released the first images of the specially woven screen where this sort of to shield the king during this most sacred moment where it's really just between him and God. Pictured here in the lower part of the slide are the ampulla and coronation spoon. So these will be the instruments used during the anointing. So the oil will be poured from the eagle-shaped ampulla, the vessel, onto the coronation spoon. And this coronation spoon is actually the only object of coronation regalia that survives from the 12th century. Everything else got melted down during the English Civil War and redone by the Merry Monarch Charles II. And of course, we're going to get to see some of this regalia while on ISCA this summer. The fourth part of the ceremony is perhaps the most visual for us watching on our phones or on TV, and that's the investiture. During this portion of the ceremony, the king will be presented with a number of objects that symbolize different aspects of kingship. And so Luke is going to share a couple of those objects with us.
Absolutely. So we're going to share with you a few of the highlights of what is known as the crown jewels. And the crown jewels, of course, as Michael said, are presented during the investiture. For the rest of the year, the crown jewels are kept under guard at the Tower of London, and our students will have the opportunity to see these objects on display in the Jewel Tower when they visit the Tower of London in July. So the first of these objects that we're going to share with you, rather wonderful object you can see there, is called the Sovereign's Orb. And the Sovereign's Orb, which represents Christian sovereignty, is placed in the sovereign's right hand, and it's set with precious stones and pearls. And it's a very iconic part of the coronation ceremony. Secondly, we have the scepter with cross. So you can see a picture of that there, very ornate. The scepter with cross symbolizes the sovereign's temporal power under the cross. And it's been used at every coronation since King Charles II, the Merry Monarch that Michael's told us about. But it was actually transformed in 1910 for King George V when he added the Cullinan 1 diamond, which is known as the first star of Africa. And that diamond, at 530 carats, remains the largest colorless cut diamond in the world. So a very ornate part of the ceremony is the scepter with cross. And there is also this ring, the coronation ring, which represents kingly dignity, will be placed on the sovereign's right hand, and then the scepters will be presented. So these are objects you can look out for during the coronation.
And then, of course, there's the crown. The crown is the ultimate symbol of royal authority. And the moment that the Archbishop of Canterbury places the crown on King Charles III's head is, of course, the climax of the morning. Trumpets will sound, bells will peal throughout London, and a gun salute will boom from the Tower of London. So very exciting. And so as we look at the crowns, it's truly a tale of two crowns. So first, here on the left is the St. Edward's crown. And this is the centerpiece of the crown jewels. This is the only time that the king will wear this particular crown. It's pretty heavy, 4 pounds, 12 ounces, and made of solid gold. And at that moment that the crown will go on King Charles III's head, everyone will acclaim, "God save the king." It's the big moment of the day. The king will then exchange this crown. He'll sort of trade it in for the daily crown, for this busy imperial state crown that you see on the right, which is used for such occasions as the state opening of Parliament. Included in this other crown, it's no less magnificent. It has 2,868 diamonds, 17 sapphires, 11 emeralds, 269 pearls, and 4 rubies, including the Black Prince's ruby, the St. Edward's sapphire, the Stuart sapphire, and the Cullinan II, which is a 317 carat diamond known as the Second Star of Africa. So we have these beautiful crowns that are used at the very end of the investiture portion of the morning for the crowning. Lastly, the fifth part of the ceremony is the homage. At this point, Charles will leave the coronation chair and move to a throne in the main part of the coronation theater. And now visible to everyone and supported by people like the Archbishop and the great officers of state, the king will officially take possession of his realm. He'll receive the homage of his people. Again, we expect that Prince William, will play this role symbolically on behalf of all the peers of the realm. And we'll hear additional anthems and fanfares and acclamations of "God Save the King."
And at this point, there will actually be a second crowning. There will be the anointing and crowning of Camilla, who will be known as the Queen Consort. And this is something that has not happened since the coronation of King George VI in 1937. So Camilla, the Queen Consort, will wear the crown commissioned by Queen Mary in 1910, but 4 of the 8 arches will be removed and the crown will be set with the Cullinan III and Cullinan IV diamonds.
So then we move to the end of the service. The king will receive Holy Communion because the ceremony takes place in the context of a communion service. And the choir will sing a Te Deum as the king withdraws to the shrine of St. Edward the Confessor. He will then finally, carrying the orb and scepter, process through the abbey out to the front of Westminster Abbey, where he will board the gold state coach and begin the royal progress back to Buckingham Palace, to the shouts and acclamations of many in the crowd. So very exciting, just a week away.
Absolutely. Please do remember to tune in on the 6th of May. It will start quite early in the morning if you are in the USA or South America. But check your listings, see where it's on TV. You can stream it on the BBC or Sky News and follow it in reputable publications. The Times of London is running a special kind of edition all about the coronation. Of course, there'll be replays and you can watch it on YouTube, I'm sure, afterwards. Whatever we think of the royal family, so in this country, it's quite interesting that that whether we believe that there should be a royal family or not, the whole nation are quite excited about this event because it's a chance to see a historic ceremony in real life. I mean, this ceremony that Michael has shared with us, that we've shared with you today, dates back, nearly 1,000 years, and it hasn't changed much. It's got a little bit shorter, okay? It's got a little bit shorter, but it hasn't changed in terms of how glorious it will be. So thank you so much for attending today's presentation, whether you're here with us in person, whether you're watching on YouTube. We really appreciate you joining to hear about the coronation. Please do have a look at our other online courses that are on Buckingham Education. If you look at the Buckingham Education website, you'll see video guides of various sites throughout the United Kingdom, and you'll be able to see things on Facebook and Instagram and so on. And of course, we are very excited to welcome so many students to the UK in this most historic year. Thank you very much, everybody.